How will the standoff between the former President Jacob Zuma and the State Capture Commission of Inquiry play out? The former president and his supporters have called on the commission chairperson, the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, to recuse himself because of what they call bias and conflict of interest. This while the commission has reportedly issued summons to compel the former president to appear before the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo next month. Good evening, I'm Aldrin Simpier, and this is Unfiltered, and we're asking you this evening, will Zuma eventually return to the Zondo Commission? You can tweet us your comments using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered, so there's hashtag SABC Unfiltered. This evening we are joined by Mkhonto weSizwe Military Veterans Association spokesperson Carl Niehaus, as well as political analyst Sandile Swana. Vanessa De Silva Fari is a legal expert from Ulrich Roux and Associates, will help us make sense of all the legalities.
Chair, the power of the Commission, lest there be any doubt, certainly in the public mind, to issue summons is set out in Section 3.1 of the Commissions Act, which states very clearly that you as the Commission have the power of a court of law to compel attendance by way of summons. So that's a statutory power that you have, and it's a power equivalent to that of the High Court. That section is quoted in the long heads before you, Chair, at footnote 2. Chair, insofar as there may be any dispute as to whether this application for the authorization for the issue of summons can and should be granted, it can be resolved by reference to legal principle and by reference to what are incontrovertible facts. There are in our submission grounds to issue the summons.
I'm satisfied that a proper case has been made out for an order authorizing that the Secretary of the Commission should sign and issue a summons against Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma, former President of the Republic of South Africa, to appear before the Commission at 10 o'clock on the 16th to the 20th of November 2020.
Well, and that's how we begin the conversation this evening. And remember that we'd love to hear from you as well using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. Let's bring in Carl Niehaus first. Carl, just a quick response to the summons that has now been issued as per the order that has been handed down by the Deputy Chief Justice.
Aldrin, we believe it is very unfortunate that this summons had been issued. It was not necessary. There could have been a much better engagement with President Zuma and his legal team. You will recall that the legal team received a very late notice that there was to be a discussion and eventually such a summons issued, and they were given over a weekend hardly chance to respond before Mr. Justice Zondo decided to call a press conference in which he was quite aggressively attacking President Zuma. So we are concerned that there is a fundamental biasness against President Zuma, that he's being targeted, and that this is being done while other people, such as Mr. Pravin Gordhan, is being treated very differently, although he also failed to appear in front of the Commission until now. But Mr. Justice Zondo continues to respond to Mr. Gordhan with deference and with respect, which is certainly not happening with regards to President Zuma.
What do you mean that not enough time has been given to his legal team?
Well, you will recall that there was a letter written by the Commission to the legal team, which they received on the Friday before the press conference that was held on the Monday.
Yep.
Now, the legal team has written back and said, but you hadn't given us enough chance to respond to this issue. And why are you rushing this? And why are you dealing with President Zuma in the public domain through a press conference while you haven't done so with any of the other people who did not appear in front of the commission? And now suddenly there's also the subpoena being issued. There is an aggressiveness from Mr. Justice Zondo and a biasness which is most unfortunate. And that's why we support President Zuma in his call that Mr. Zondo should recuse himself from this commission, because he's proving himself biased and therefore he's proving himself to be incompetent in dealing with these issues. Eldrin, you must remember that there are many issues in the commission which are specifically related to President Zuma. And in some instances, Justice Zondo even brings President Zuma into matters where witnesses don't even mention President Zuma. So when we say that he should be recused, or he should recuse himself, we talk about all of those issues which are implicated by his behavior, and therefore this commission is unable to do its job.
Yeah. So is it not fair then to say that his legal team did have enough time to respond, but the response thereof was rather that the Deputy Chief Justice should recuse himself?
The legal team responded to the short notice.
Yeah.
The manner in which the Deputy Justice dealt with the matter at the press conference, and also the personal matters of conflict of interest, which the Deputy Chief Justice never declared. And it was that whole comprehensive argument that they then presented and said, well, our client feels that he is not going to receive a fair hearing from the judge, and therefore we call on his recusal.
Okay. Vanessa, let's bring you into this conversation as well. Are you able to ascertain, looking at, for instance, how the State Capture Commission of Inquiry has been going on for so long, and some of the testimonies that have been there, whether or not as a person who is, I don't really want to say an accused person, but who have allegations being leveled against them, then make the argument and say that the person who's presiding over this matter, that person is biased and therefore should recuse themselves?
Hi, Algin, and thank you for having me. Well, you know, one must remember is that when Mr. Jacob Zuma is being called to give evidence in this sense, he's being called in the capacity as a witness, as if he was a witness in a criminal trial. So for him to allege that someone is being biased towards him or being prejudicial towards him, he would need to first show that there's a specific right that he needs to protect. And at this stage, he doesn't have that right. He's a witness being called to give evidence in respect of an investigation that he is part of. And he's been called to give evidence or to answer questions specifically in relation to matters where he's been made mention of or reference to. And he must answer to that. So, you know, he's got no right to protect. He's got no prejudice to protect at this stage. And one must also remember that him coming in and giving, you know, any kind of evidence, he's doing so as a witness. And at any point in time, if he feels that he might incriminate himself, or if he feels that he might cause trouble for himself, he can elect not to answer. He can elect not to be part of it, and he can elect to walk away. So at this stage, you know, I don't think that he has a very strong prospect of saying that Mr. Justice Zondo has been biased or prejudicial towards him. And I think that Mr. Justice Zondo has done exactly what he's needed to do in order to get the answers that he needs from Mr. Jacob Zuma.
Okay, we'll have the conversation around the rules of the inquiry as well, which have been amended. But just looking at trying to prove bias, what is it that you need to show that to make that argument of biasness?
Well, there needs to be a reasonable apprehension of biasness. So basically, an objective and reasonable person needs to look at what Mr. Justice Zondo has done and needs to decide objectively and reasonable that he has been biased to Mr. Jacob Zuma. And what one also needs to look into is whether or not there's any conflict of interest, any personal interest, or any sense of unfairness in anything that he's done. And if none of that has been illustrated or established, then, you know, it's difficult to claim biasness.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Swana, just quickly on this point before we go to the ad break, is Vanessa's making the point that the former president is being called on as a witness. However, though, the State Capture Commission of Inquiry stems from an inquiry into allegations being levelled against the then president of the country, who is Jacob Zuma, and some of the allegations that have been levelled against him now as well. Babusana, can you hear me? Okay, he's struggling to hear us. Okay, we're going to try and get back to him for that conversation. Remember that you can be part of the conversation as well using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered, as you've heard earlier on that the summons has now been issued against the former president of the country, former President Jacob Zuma, to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry in November. And welcome back to Unfiltered with me, Alderin Simpi. And the conversation we're having this evening is around the appearance of former President Jacob Zuma before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, whether or not that will happen, since the summons have now been issued for him to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. We're in conversation this evening with Vanessa Da Silva Fari, who's a legal expert from Ulrich Roux and Associates. We also have Carl Niehaus, MKMVA, a spokesperson, and right now joined by Sandile Swana, who's a political analyst. Sandile, I was saying earlier on that Vanessa, in explaining why the State Capture Commission of Inquiry wants former President Jacob Zuma to appear before Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, is because they're calling on him as a witness. However, though, things are not as clear-cut, considering that the State Capture Commission of Inquiry is born out of a recommendation or remedial action that comes from the Public Protector's investigation into state capture, which made allegations against the former president.
Yeah, well, it is still straightforward in the sense that the reason why we ended up here also was that former President Zuma failed to cooperate fully with Thuli Madonsela, who was the public protector at the time, and provide all the information that was needed. So as the term of office of Thuli Madonsela was coming to an end, she then created a vehicle that would then continue with that investigation. And that vehicle was this commission, which had then to be endorsed, signed off by the former President Zuma himself. Mm-hmm. So, and then in the layman's terms, like that we must understand that Zuma is being invited because this is a commission of inquiry to determine the truth. What is the truth about particular allegations? What is the truth? What actually happened? Yeah. So Zuma, there is information that is deposited in his mind, that is in his mind, that the commission needs to get to, and they cannot find that information anywhere else other than in him to complete the record of what is believed to have happened during his presidency. Yeah.
You now mention how the former president, even during the inquiry that was led by Advocate Thuli Madonsela at the time, also said that he wasn't afforded an opportunity, and then Thuli Madonsela at the later stage released recordings where she actually sat down with the former president and his legal representative, asking him questions and him refusing to answer those questions.
Yes, I think that if we're to be as blunt and as direct as possible about this, at that time he failed to answer questions. In another case that is involved in, he ended up getting a warrant for his arrest being issued for failing to cooperate with the court and present himself in court. In the present court case, he is one of the people that just walked out of the commission saying that he cannot answer this question. Has been brought to the commission under false pretenses, and subsequent to that, he missed an invitation to come back on the basis that he was on his other criminal trial on the arms deal. Yep. He missed twice on the basis of medical complaints, and then now this, very recently, I think the last one he missed was in September, which then caused the immediate cause of this summons that have been issued now. So he has been delinquent in many ways up until now.
Okay, and Carl, your response to that, because certainly there is a history.
Aldrin, I must admit that I'm at a disadvantage here because I couldn't hear much of what Zandile or Vanessa was saying. But let me emphasize that on the legal side of these matters, there will be a proper and full response from the legal team of President Zuma. And quite soon, there will be a legal argument set out why they are requesting for him to recuse himself. And also, this is the bit I could hear of what Vanessa said, deal also with those issues of personal conflict, which created a conflict of interest. Those are important issues, and the legal team will deal with it. I'm obviously not a lawyer. What I'm doing is I'm dealing here with the political matter, and this commission, first and foremost, is political. We can argue the legal issues, and Vanessa is a legal expert. I don't expect from her to do anything different. But ultimately, this is a political commission with a political intent. And what we have been consistently arguing is that the political intent of this commission is selective, it is biased, it is directing itself at certain persons while it's ignoring other people. We've pointed out how there had been evidence that Mr. Brian Molefe, that Mr. Lucky Montana wanted to lead in front of the commission, and yet they had not been given the opportunity. But in every possible instance where Mr. Justice Zondo gets the chance, he concentrates all the evidence, even when, as I've said before, President Zuma is not brought in by the witness, he brings him in. So there's a clear target, and that target is President Zuma, and we say the reason for that is because of, first and foremost, the radical economic transformation policy positions that he has taken, and he's being targeted for that. So on the legal matter, let us talk about the legalities. Let us deal with the issues that Vanessa raised, but let us never leave the politics aside.
Let's touch on the politics then. One of the reasons that the former president also raises, he says that there is a history between himself and Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, professional as well as, I think, a family relationship. When did that family relationship rise as a conflict? Was that before Zondo was appointed as the chairperson of the Commission of Inquiry, or was that after?
That is not the question you should ask, Aldrin. The question is,
I think it's quite important.
Mr. Justice Zondo, listen to me, then you'll understand what I'm saying. Has Mr. Justice Zondo declared that there is a family relationship when he was approached by the Chief Justice to take up this position? And has he also declared that there is a stressed relationship on a personal and in a professional way between him and President Zuma? That is not issues that should be pushed aside. The moment that when Mr. Justice Zondo was asked, can you take the lead and chair this commission? He is an eminent legal mind. He understands the issues of conflict of interest. At that point, he should have informed the Chief Justice, and in fact, that should have been made public, because we as the public are sitting in front of our televisions watching this commission, and we must understand the context. The fact that he did not do so was a fatal error of a legal kind, and we say he did so, he made that legal error because of the politics and because he wanted to get this position in order to target President.
But the question again is, did the former president know about this conflict before he was appointed the chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry? And I'll tell you why this is important, Carl. It's because the former president has already appeared before the Deputy Chief Justice. So when did this conflict become such a problem for the former president?
That conflict is a problem in the context of the Deputy Chief Justice not having raised it. I don't think you understand properly the situation. It is not for President Zuma to raise that issue of conflict until the point where President Zuma experiences that those issues are playing itself out in the commission at his disadvantage. But legally,
Yeah.
It was for Deputy President Zondo, Deputy Chief Justice
yeah.
Zondo. It was for him to raise it at the moment when he was appointed, and he knows very well
Okay.
that he was supposed to have done so.
Okay, Vanessa, let's hear your take on this. This conflict that Carl Niehaus raises, which of course has been raised by the former president as well. The thing is that the former president has already appeared before the Zondo Commission, but let's set that aside. Having to prove conflict of interest, what is it that you need to show?
Well, you would need to show that there was, or that there is, a personal relationship between yourself and the presiding officer, which in this instance is Justice Zondo, and you would need to show that you would be somehow prejudiced or favored by that specific personal relationship. So, you know, there is a duty on Chief Justice Zondo to disclose if there is a personal relationship, but only if he strongly believes that that personal relationship could impair his judgment on the matter and could take away from him being impartial in the matter. Mm-hmm. Simultaneously, there is a duty on the person appearing before him, so in this instance on Mr. Jacob Zuma, to have raised that issue and that possible conflict of interest at the beginning already. Before appearing when he first did, he should have then, if it was a deep concern for him, raised it at that point in time and said that he feels that he would be prejudiced because of this relationship, either prejudiced or greatly favored. So, you know, legally, the duty lies on both parties.
Yeah. So now that the former president has raised this particular issue, what does this then mean for Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo if he did not raise this conflict with the Chief Justice at the time of his appointment?
Well, Justice Zondo will need to answer to this allegation. He would need to answer to whether or not he himself is party to this personal relationship, whether he believes that it is a conflict of interest, and whether he believes that it's affected his impartiality. And he would need to give his reasons as to why he didn't disclose it if he did not disclose it. And he would need to explain why he didn't think it would be necessary to disclose it at that time. Now that Mr. Jacob Zuma has brought it to light and has raised issue with it, he would also need to disclose that irrespective of there being a personal relationship, it hasn't affected him in being objective or impartial, and it hasn't affected him, most importantly, in his duties within this inquiry. He has still done exactly what he's needed to do, and he hasn't stepped away from it or done more or less simply because there could possibly be a personal relationship between the two of them.
Okay, Sandile, let's hear your take on this, considering that the former president is only raising this issue now, even though he's appeared before Zondo before.
My take on it is that former President Zuma has actually raised different concerns. The first one was that when he discovered the intensity of questions, when he had pitched up at a commission of inquiry, he then objected to the type of incisive questions which were trying to extract the truth out of him. And then out of that, he then decided to basically walk out of the commission. From there, he then developed other excuses. This is the latter-day excuse, a very recent excuse that came up of why he might not want to participate. He wanted the commission, the chairperson of the commission, to recuse himself after having failed with the other avenues of not answering the questions. So this to us is hiding behind his own finger.
Okay, so we have to say goodbye to our SABC3 viewers, but the conversation will continue on the SABC News channel. That is SABC News channel 404 on the DSTV bouquet. Very important question to raise is also the former president arguing that he appeared before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry as a witness, not to be interrogated. And they felt that at the time when the former president appeared for the first time, he felt that he was being interrogated. That conversation just after this. And welcome back to Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St-Pierre. So this evening we're joined by Mkhonto Wesizwe Military Veterans Association spokesperson Carl Niehaus, as well as political analyst Sandile Swana. Vanessa da Silva Faria is a legal expert from Ulrich Roo and Associates, who's also joining us for this conversation. Sandile, let's go back to you and that question around I don't know how to put it, but how the former president felt that the questions were coming in the cross-examination, which is something that he wasn't, I think, expecting from the evidence leaders. And I'll get Vanessa to comment on this as well, in terms of when the questions are being asked from an evidence leader, what type of questions are supposed to be asked, and does it really take the tone of an interrogation or cross-examination? But just your take on the allegations that the former president has made. Hi, Sandile, are you there? Okay, let's look at some of the tweets that we've received so far. You can use the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. We've got Spiwo here who says that his lawyers will later advise President Zuma to go there and not answer any direct questions. He will make opening remarks and then keep quiet. We won't achieve anything. Zuma's lawyers, Advocate Skakane, will rise up every 2 minutes to object to Advocate Pretorius. And Kunisto says Jacob Zuma must go to the Zondo Commission and stop his stories. What he's doing now is just trying to avoid to appear to the commission. This is using the hashtag Unfiltered and hashtag SABC News Unfiltered. So to be part of the conversation, what you can do is you can tweet your comments using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. Okay, understand that Vanessa is back. Vanessa, I was just want to ask you, in terms of the role that the evidence leader plays in this in a commission of inquiry, because the allegations that have been raised before is that the former president felt that he was being interrogated and there was cross-examination that was taking place.
Well, I mean, the role that the lead examiner plays is to gather information. And this is the purpose of the commission as well. It's to gather information, it's to go on a fact-finding mission, and to then come to a conclusion as to what should happen moving forward. And for Mr. Jacob Zuma to feel that he was being interrogated, well, the reality is that, you know, there's certain issues that he needs to respond to, and there's certain questions that he needs to answer. So the whole point of it is to gather as much information and get as much evidence as they can so that Chief Justice Zondo can come to a proper conclusion as to what needs to happen to certain members. And what the best way forward will be for those members. Remember, Chief Justice Zondo, all he's going to do at the end of this is he's going to give a recommendation as to, and he's going to refer the matters to the South African Police, to the NPA, and he's going to say to them, this is what I recommend happens, and they must take it further. And they will need to take it further from there on, where they will then evaluate the evidence and they will then interrogate and decide what to do with it.
Okay. I think we have Sandile back on the line. Sandile was saying that, speaking politically, though, what do you make of this accusation coming from the former president?
I think that the accusation, and there's another accusation here that we need to come to deal with, which has been made, that there's a political agenda. Part of this is that the whole reason why, one of the main reasons why Justice Zondo is unsuitable is that he's got a political agenda.
Yep.
Now, this political agenda does need to be detailed as to what it is and who's going to benefit out of it. At this stage, that to me, at any rate, I'm not quite clear how that is going to be. For instance, radical economic transformation is a program that Cyril Ramaphosa himself has articulated. It also appears in some of the state documents already. It appears to me that it is an ANC program, if that is what the issue is. So even if Zuma were to go to jail at a later stage, the program, there are many people who can continue with the program. So I think that this whole idea of trying to bring political complexion in this is going to be a waste of time, more particularly given that we're dealing with someone who has been very delinquent in many of these trials, including the arms deal that has been delayed until now through his efforts.
Yep.
Let me stop there for now.
Okay, let's get Carl to respond to that. Carl, the political agenda?
There's clearly a political agenda, and clearly Zandile, I think, has a political view. The problem with him is that his political view does not concur with what is happening in that commission, because he wants the commission to behave exactly in the way it does. So he doesn't.
Who's driving this political agenda, which you say?
Politically happening. Well, that political agenda, Aldrin, is driven by those who are opposed to radical economic transformation, and Judge Zondo is driving that political agenda very clearly in the biasness that he is showing against President Zuma. I've given you examples. You see, I can continue talking about those examples. I can continue talking about the political context, which all of us know is exactly how this commission came about. But if you do not want to accept that, or if you want to argue that there's not a political agenda, because exactly it suits your political agenda to argue that there is not one, then I cannot help those who try to be blind for the sake of the politics that they want to advance. I can't help them, sorry.
Can you name those?
I'm not going to name names, because that is not the purpose of the point that we make. There is an overall political agenda that came straight out of the report of the former public protector. That political agenda included the narrowness of the definition of what state capture is, also the narrow time period. And that political agenda continues to play itself out within that commission, and it continues to play itself out in the conduct of the chair of that commission. That is why we say that the chair has to recuse himself, and that is why we've consistently said this commission is not simply a commission trying to investigate state capture, but to use the issue of state capture to target certain people, and in order to get those people to be removed from the political scene, in order to target them. We see the same thing outside the commission at this stage happening with the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Comrade Ace Magashule. We have a political environment in which issues of legality, issues of state capture, issues of corruption are being used selectively in order to target certain people, to remove them from the political scene so that it is easier to continue with a new liberal economic policy program that prevails in South Africa and which will never serve the people and which is not the official economic policy program of the African National Congress.
Just quickly, Carl, before we go to an ad break, would you say that former President Jacob Zuma was blindsided in signing into law the State Capture Commission of Inquiry?
You're quite aware that when President Zuma had to sign that State Capture Commission into being, that he expressed his concerns. He also expressed his concerns about the legality of the commission. And yet he was pushed to do so. He did so. But now again, in the recent letter from his lawyers, that issue of the legality of the commission was again raised by him. And I'm pretty sure that his legal representatives, when they eventually file their documents asking for the recusal of Mr. Justice Zondo, will raise that issue of legality once again.
Okay, and one of those issues that we expect the lawyers to be raising is the issue around the amendments of the rules of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Also that the testimonies being delivered at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry can be used as evidence as the NPA as well as the Hawks are investigating allegations of state capture. Well, as we wrap up this conversation around the State Capture Commission of Inquiry and whether former President Jacob Zuma will eventually appear before the inquiry, one critical point is around the amendments of the rules of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, which also now allows for the NPA as well as the Hawks, who are investigating also allegations of state capture, to use some of the evidence that emanate from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. And Vanessa, the point that was raised by some lawyers is that that in itself is unconstitutional because witnesses who appear before a State Capture Commission of Inquiry are there to give evidence so that the commission itself would be able to get to the truth. But if there is something like you could incriminate yourself, for instance, or the evidence that you give could be used against you, that would deter them from giving evidence. And earlier on, you even mentioned that the former president could even elect not to answer certain questions for fear of incriminating himself.
Yes, well, when a witness gives evidence in the inquiry, they're giving evidence in their capacity as a witness in a criminal trial. And of course, if there's anything that might incriminate them, then they could elect not to respond to it and to stay away from it. Whether or not that is constitutional or unconstitutional is a debatable topic. It's only really an accused person who has a constitutional right not to incriminate themselves. Mm-hmm. And that accused person only becomes an accused person once they've been arrested, charged, and charges have been preferred against them. So, it's difficult to then say that there's a constitutional right being violated, because when as a witness you're giving information, if you feel that you are incriminating yourself, you can step away from it. So you are immediately protected in that sense. As an accused person, if they ever had to use that information or the fact that you kept quiet against you, you are even further protected in the sense that if you do ever become an accused person, you have the constitutional right not to be self-incriminated and not to use anything that you have caused yourself to be used against you. So in essence, their rights are very much protected. But yes, on the other hand, it could defer people from telling the truth and from giving evidence in these inquiries. But the point of it, again, is to go back to the purpose of the inquiry. The purpose of the inquiry is to get as much evidence and as much information as possible. If a witness is reluctant to give evidence on the basis that they fear that they might incriminate themselves, then perhaps that witness should be open to investigation. But again, it's an investigation that must be done then lawfully and through the correct means.
Okay, Sandile, just quickly from your end, what's your take on this decision around the amendment of the rules of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry and also allowing the Hawks as well as the NPA to draw staff members who have helped the Zondo Commission to find some of the evidence and what some would say probably call connecting the dots?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think from the point of view of the former State President Jacob Zuma, former President Jacob Zuma has publicly stated that he has never been corrupt. So any mechanism that has got facts and truths that can be tested in court for any reason, no matter how it is procured, it should suit him, because he has never been corrupt according to his own statement. And he has been asking all over the show for a day to clear himself in court. So if there are people who are able to speed up the process of going to court with whatever truth and whatever fact, as a person who has been a custodian for quite some time of the Constitution of the Republic, he should show by example and go to court regardless and face any truth, because he knows that he has never been corrupt and he can win any corruption case against him. So President Jacob Zuma should be very comfortable.
Okay, Carl, I see a little smile there in your face.
Zandile is really disingenuous, and his prejudice against President Zuma is showing all over the place. The issue is that halfway during the commission, you end up changing the rules, and you put the possibility of evidence being given in that commission to be used against the person, which can lead to that person being charged and incriminating himself, is problematic. That is exactly the arguments that had been advanced and will again be advanced by the legal team of President Zuma, and they're solid legal arguments. So for Zandile to play this little word game here about the president said he's never corrupt and therefore she should welcome this happening, it is just what it is, a word game. But let me deal quickly with this issue of the aggressiveness in the manner in which President Zuma was questioned during his first appearance in front of the commission. I was there. I was amazed that in a commission which says we're going to have an evidence leader, which is going to help us to get as much information as possible because we need to get clarity about these issues of state capture, that you get the kind of aggressiveness that we saw in that cross-examination of President Zuma. which again is an indication that we are dealing here not with the intention to get as much possible information, not to behave as an evidence leader, but as an aggressive cross-examiner. And many times during that period that President Zuma was there, his advocate had to stand up, interrupt, and said, please, Mr. Zondo, please, Judge, this can't be acceptable. This kind of style of cross-examination is not evidence leading. And every time Mr. Justice Zondo allowed that aggressive cross-examination to continue, which is again another example of his biasness towards President Zuma within the context of all the other issues of biasness that I've already referred to.
Carl, just quickly in closing, do you know whether the legal team of the former president will be heading to the court in case the Deputy Chief Justice does not recuse himself?
Well, of course, what will happen is that there will be an application for his recusal. We will have to wait to see what Mr. Justice Zondo does with regards to that application, because before anything else can happen, and before he can start issuing further action on the basis of the subpoena, he will have to deal with a matter of recusal that will be filed in the court, and the response, obviously, of the legal team will be on the basis of his reaction and what he does with regards to the recusal. What now comes first is the issue of recusal, and we strongly back that call by President Zuma for recusal.
And as far as you're concerned, until then, he will not appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, even though the summons have been issued?
The president has been clear that he's calling for the recusal of Mr. Justice Zondo. Mr. Justice Zondo will have to respond to that issue, and then we will see how matters unfold. I don't think we can say more than that.
Okay, thank you so much. It's certainly a story that we'll be following closely, considering that the summons have been issued for the former president to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry next month. And mind you, by the end of March, the State Capture Commission of Inquiry should be done with all its investigations, and the report should be handed over to the president of the country, that is President Cyril Ramaphosa. We've come to the end of today's show. Thank you so much for all your contributions. From me and the Unfiltered team, it is a good evening. Goodbye.